Well, there it is. Hi guys, just going to do a quick chat in regards to the Diablo 4 quarterly update that's just been released June 2020. So this came out 25th of June. I noticed this in the Battle.net app, so I just wanted to go over it. I actually haven't looked at it properly. I'm just going to read through the article and just try to work it out. I'm curious about Diablo 4, as I imagine many of you are as well, so I thought it's been a while since I've done an upload on the Witty One channel, and I always try to do stuff that I'm actually interested in, not necessarily just stuff that would be good for YouTube. So, for those of you that stick around, I suppose, if this is something you're interested in, then let's go through it together. So, to the Diablo community, hello and welcome to our latest Diablo 4 quarterly update. We are excited to share some of the progress we've made on the game today. As in the case with many other game and technology companies at the time of writing this, the Diablo 4 team has fully transitioned to working from home. While the transition has introduced challenges, we feel very fortunate to be able to keep momentum going strong on the development of Diablo 4. So that's good to know. Team playtest. As with many other games, we organize the development of Diablo 4 around team milestones. Often these culminate with a build which we play together and talk about as a team. For example, the milestones leading up to BlizzCon 2019 culminated in a team playtest of the demo that helped us unveil the game during the show. I got to play that at 2019. It was a lot of fun. It did feel a bit too much like Diablo 3 though, but I think that's what they were basing it off, and I know that the game has at least got 2 to 3 years from that point of when I played the demo, so hopefully they can make Diablo 4 more of its own game rather than just an add-on to Diablo 3. That's kind of my biggest concern. I'd rather it be more of its own game, introducing enough new mechanics that I don't feel like I'm just playing Diablo 3 again. So, besides getting an early look at what other team members had accomplished, this also allowed us to stress test the demo, catch additional bugs, and make improvements before the show. For our most recent milestone, we focused on blocking in all the elements in a region known as the Dry Steppes, complete with campaign content, open world elements, itemization, a PvP subzone, dungeons, and a cinematic to cap the completion of the region's narrative. Our goal was to then have the team play the game from home over the course of 2 full days and then spend some time analyzing data and discussing our reactions. Of course, we play the game all the time, but we're often examining individual features or areas. Taking the time to play the same build together as a team over multiple days gives us a different perspective. So they're taking the time to play the same build together as a team over multiple days. Yeah, that makes sense. Just let's look at this particular zone, play it to death, and then each give our feedback. So that's a cool way of looking at it, so they can all be on the same page. It lets us see how all the current features harmonize over a longer playtime. We had this as a goal before we knew we were going to move to a work from home environment. As it turned out, it ended up being a really good way to reconnect as a team. Similarly, we hope that chatting about the playtest and sharing some screenshots with you will provide context for future blog updates or pique your curiosity about future updates or topics. It's worth noting that the playtest also didn't represent the entirety of our progress. Other regions of the game are underway. The Dry Steppes is just the region where we made a concerted push to create a complete and cohesive experience that we could draw observations from. Let us know if you like this approach to the blog or if you didn't, and we can adjust future updates accordingly. As always, your feedback is highly appreciated. Hello there, guys that are watching. So, a word about blockout. So, look at that. That's the mesh of the environment. Pre-alpha in development content, not final. Well, I think that's pretty obvious, but of course, you got to put something there to let it know, and that's the environment a little bit more fleshed out with the textures. Blocking out or grey boxing levels allows us to play areas where the art isn't finished. As part of the development, visuals are often kept in rough form so the game team can cheaply test ideas and iterate on them. If something isn't fun, it's much cheaper to change or discard a blockout asset than a final one. I actually really agree with this. Gameplay always comes first. Who cares about graphics? Graphics is a nice icing on the cake, but it's never going to replace gameplay. At least for me. I'm more old school. Sometimes I feel like you kids today, you just want your graphics. But I'm sure they want good gameplay as well. It's just unfortunately a lot of game companies know that graphics sells. But anyway, before I go too deep into that one, I like that they're just sort of concentrating on what makes the game fun to play rather than sort of finalizing all these assets and then working out whether the game's fun to play afterwards, because then the damage is done. When we share models or screenshots with you, they are often quite far along to adequately convey our vision for the game. We don't typically show blockout assets as they don't really do justice to the engine or the artistry of the folks on the team. See, that's an issue, isn't it? Right? That they're worried to show that stuff off because people would then shite on them. Although, ironically, I did shite on them for one diorama they did, but that was kind of rough, like the whole rendering of it. But I don't think it was supposed to be shown off, or I think IGN just showed it off, but I don't know if they were supposed to, whether it was like agreed by Blizzard, because that wasn't a finished product and that wasn't a good way to show off the early access part of the game. Anyway, but as part of showing the behind the scenes of how we make the game, we thought you'd appreciate seeing how the transition of blockout assets into more polished ones. I think context really helps, actually. Yeah, if you give us context behind the models that you're showing, etc., people can get behind and use their own brain and logic to work out that, you know, stuff is still in transition and hasn't been finished yet. So you can give them a little bit of a break. Since some of the assets shown in the blog might not be final, so please bear in mind as you check the screenshots below. So here we have cool looking demon. Got some Balrog vibes behind him. Different styles of horns to give him a little bit of flavor, which is nice because you're probably going to see a lot of the same kind of demons, I would imagine, as you would too in these kind of action RPGs. It's just little touches to the horns can at least give them, you know, style, such as back in Warcraft 3, when you think about how the models essentially are just shaded a different color of red or blue. It's essentially the same creature, but it's just shaded differently, and a few things are textured slightly differently, like more tattoos or whatever. It just makes it look like it's a different character, but really it's the same model. Anyway, there's your character, assumably, in comparison to the size of this character. That's cool. They show like a base comparison. So let's take a look at this one. Oh, wow. That kind of reminds me a little bit of like Mortal Kombat, right? Or even more realistically, Doom. Because in the original Doom, and I'm talking like way back 1990s, they actually had real models of the demons, and then they basically took pictures of them and rendered them onto the computer. That's why the models look kind of so cool and sort of like demonic, is because it's got this kind of real feel to it. And that guy looks pretty damn good. And here he is, probably within the game itself. Nice. There's this sort of like asymmetric vibe to him as well. It's like he's not exactly the same on either side. So that's neat to see. A classic demon from concept to blockout to in-game art. Storytelling. A couple of things have evolved with how we deliver a story in Diablo 4. First, we have conversations in Diablo 3. We relied on UI panes with a character's name and portrait. We're experimenting with a mix of tool-generated and manually choreographed cameras to tackle conversations. For simple interactions with NPCs, we bring the camera in closer to the characters while still maintaining an overall isometric feel, and use a library of animations to deliver the general gist of the conversations. For more complex conversations, we take a similar camera approach, but here the characters' movements and animations are more deliberately handcrafted. This lets us deliver story moments that are complex while keeping you in the world as much as possible. Here's a shot from one such interaction. So yeah, I think they go for more of this kind of in-game kind of cutscene, which I think is cool. Oh wow, look at that, they're just experimenting on this demon. Nice. A more zoomed-in overhead camera helps us deliver some simple story beats. The second storytelling method we are developing is real-time cutscenes for RTCs. Here we grab your camera and treat the storytelling more like a movie, so we're reserving this technique for more of the most important storytelling moments. Having these be real-time has great advantages. We can show your character with their currently equipped armor as part of the scene, for example, but we can also display them at your current resolution. and with your currently enabled graphic settings, so they end up feeling more seamless and like a part of the game. We showed you some early work on the real-time in-game cinematics during the BlizzCon demo. Yeah, they did. Our cinematics and engine teams have made a lot of improvements since then, so we were excited to see a fully produced cinematic serve as the climax of the Dry Steps experience. And the, well, I should be Dry Steeps, but I say Steps. And the team was not disappointed. Here's a screen grab that the story and cinematic folks have given us the go-ahead to share with you, as it shouldn't spoil the details of what's to come. Interesting headwear. Doesn't look very comfortable, but then again, if he's drinking from a skull cup, I'm not sure he's worried about comfort. That's a cool angle. That's almost like he's looking at Lilith as she's being born or something, because in the cinematic, if you haven't seen it, I think that guy's responsible for trying to get Lilith reborn into the world, and it's a kind of almost an image from Lilith's perspective looking up at him. I could be completely wrong, but it's just kind of how I'm in. I don't know. I can't think of the right word for it. Anticipating it. It's not the right word, but anyway. In-game cinematics in Diablo 4 set a properly dark mode. Open world. One of the main new features we are bringing to the Diablo series is the open world of Sanctuary. So while you can concentrate on the story campaign and work through that, we have a variety of open world systems and pieces of content that you are also discovering along the way. If you want to take a break from the main campaign and go exploring, crafting or PvPing, you are free to do so. During the playtest, we saw this variability in action quite a bit. On an average playthrough, team members took several hours to complete the campaign content for the region, but those who focused only on the story finished the arc in less than half the average time, and were, of course, able to do the side content after that. We think the ability to approach the game with a different mix of story and side content tailored to your own appetite will make playing and replaying the campaign more enjoyable than it has been in previous RPGs. Yeah, I think that was probably an issue maybe with Diablo 3's. I actually didn't mind playing through the original Diablo 3, but a lot of people had an issue with the story, and you're kind of forced to go through it. And then they ended up creating an environment where you could just level up your character without having to play in the story. You could just level up. I say they ended up creating. I don't know if they always had it, but I remember they had the option at least for both.
Trust an elf.
Silverhide.
Thanks for the years of content.
Thank you very much for the sub as well. Okay. Playtests like this allow us to collect and aggregate data to help guide our design. This distribution heat map indicates areas in the Dry Steps that saw the most traffic. So a lot of heat over here and here. Interesting. While we have many open world activities such as crafting events, world PvP and side quests, perhaps the most popular open world feature was camps. There are locations of importance that have been overrun by enemies, which once cleansed turned into friendly outposts with NPCs in a waypoint location. While there is a backstory to each camp, most of the storytelling is visual and quests don't directly send you to them. For example, one of the camps in the zone was a town afflicted by a curse that turned villagers into piles of salt. That's rough. Another was a crypt haunted by a spirit that possesses the bodies of various undead, jumping from skeleton to skeleton until you defeat him. We really dug the impact of seeing the world changes as you reclaim a small piece of Sanctuary and bring hope back to its common folk. We look forward to the open world designers showing you more about this feature in the future. So it gives them a chance to create some sort of, not necessarily quests, but sort of events that allow players to sort of group up and save a scenario. The ruins of Quara Yizu, the salt-covered ruins of a town afflicted by an ancient curse. So there's the map. That's your position. So it's fairly simplistic, the map style. I'm not sure if they're going to flesh that out or whether this is like what you get. Obviously, pre-alpha, etc., etc. Camps start out as hostile and turn into small hubs with a waypoint and fenders after being completed. Finally, mounts were another thing you could obtain during the playthrough. We really liked how the open world interacts with mounts. You could get to your objectives more quickly without trivializing travel or combat. Some English words can't be pronounced unless you sort of take a moment and breathe and then say the word. You can't necessarily say it after announcing another word so quickly. I don't know why I needed to explain that, but it does come across that way. Itemization for mounts also opened up new access of progression. One of my favourite things about mounts was customizing it by attaching a trophy to the saddle to signal to other players on obscure challenge in the zone that I had completed. Of course, there is more work to be done on mounts. For example, on navigation and turning, it is currently too easy to get stuck on stray pieces of collision. Or to get like World of Warcraft when you're sort of like auto running your mount and it just gets stuck on like this tiny little rock. And it's just like running but not going anywhere. Or to get dismounted by a random enemy projectile. These are all things that are going to be better the more we play and tune the feature. Yeah, I'm really interested in the mountain feature for just moving about quickly and getting to the next zone, Fine-tuning, so multiplayer. Fine-tuning the right approach to multiplayer in Diablo 4 has been challenging. Our goal has always been to incorporate elements from shared world games without the game ever feeling like it's veering into massively multiplayer territory. To be clear, this is a philosophy rather than a tech limitation. We find that the game stops feeling like Diablo and the world feels less dangerous when you see other players too often in too higher numbers. So I think they plan to have these kind of smaller party groups in these instanced areas where you can only see so many players. Towns become social hubs where you can run into other players and key segments in the story are completed. It will break down so this has got to be an online-only experience. Like, what if you disconnected your internet? Would you still not be able to play this? That's what I wonder, if you could just truly play a solo experience without other people interfering. I'll break down our experiences during the playtest with some examples. Dungeons and key story moments are always private, just the player and the party. Once story moments are complete and towns turned into social hubs, you'd run into a few people in town. While on the road, you'd sometimes run into a player here and there, and then finally, if you went to a location where a world event was happening, you would see a larger congregation of players trying to defend against an attack by a cannibal horde or trying to take down Ashava, the demonic world boss we showed at BlizzCon. It's worth calling out that whilst some coordination is helpful during these events, you are never forced to join a party. Solo players can walk in, help complete an event, and claim a reward. We think this seamless approach to multiplayer is working well and look forward to sharing more about this approach with you. In our tests so far, the world feels alive and dynamic without compromising the feel of Diablo. And for players that do want to party up against the minions of hell, we have new tools available to find a group, whether by activity or proximity in the game world. I remember playing Final Fantasy, was it 14 or 15 online? Whichever one it was, it's like the popular MMO that's still doing very well today. One of the fun things about that was when you was out in the world, there'd be these events where like there's a boss and you'd be racing to try to get to it before every other player managed to get there and kill it, because it was essentially a lot of the time it's just like racing down the boss, and if you got there you sort of like get a little bonus experience or reward. I can't remember exactly what you got for it, but it was always worth trying to get there if you could. And it would be this moment where the boss is like 10% or 5% left. Or you could think of it like World of Warcraft Mists of Pandaria, when you had like the multiple bosses in that isle that you went to in one of the later stages. I can't remember what it was called, the Hidden Isle or Mr. Fail. And yeah, you'd always try to get to the boss just before everyone else managed to kill it. It's kind of funny. Betito says no one wants to play a solo game anymore. It's 2020. They want always online social games so you can block it and report 90% of other players. Yeah, you're being sarcastic. I get it, but yeah. Well, the world boss Ashava, shown during BlizzCon 2019 in Scosglen, aka Scotland, can spawn in the dry steeps as well. Items and progression. Timeless Island. Okay, it must have been that, or Timeless Isle. One of the things that was very useful about our 2-day playtest was that we could get better feedback on progression, as there was a sense of permanence. Gear and skill choices you make on day 1 have an impact on day 2. Though some people chose to roll ults, as we had multiple classes to test. A friend of mine used to say that Diablo is the game that you could keep playing inside your head, and Diablo 4 is no different. In addition to the official playtime allotted to the team during the playtest, I could feel the game lingering in my mind, thinking about the items that could possibly drop from my build and talents I could finally unlock to get me all those key skill interactions. You might have already read the developer blog by David Kim shortly after the last BlizzCon. In it, he describes a new affixes and itemization philosophies. We'll have a beefier update on items later in this year, but in the meantime, here are some items that dropped during the playtest to whet your appetite. Various items from the playtest utilizing the new attribute system. Note that the item icons are not final art. So let's take a look at this. Eminence Anvil. So an extra percentage to crush and blow damage, and requires a certain amount of power, so you're going to need to access these. It's kind of like having 19 strength to wield this sword. If you don't have 19 strength, you won't be able to wield it correctly. So a lot of percentages, which is interesting because that can always work towards builds. Like with with Warcraft 3, when you get kind of percentage abilities, it's kind of interesting. Percentage to crit and all that kind of stuff. Percentage to heal on damage. So damage, chance, gem strength. Okay, we got this one over here. There's a lot of information, so these are legendary items. Forms a rift in your path that increases your critical strike chance by 39%, so you'd probably want to stand in where your path is so you can do more damage. You deal less damage but generate more fury. So that could definitely affect specific builds. It'd be like, oh, you don't really want to do less damage, but if it means 60% more fury, you could theoretically do more damage with a particular type of fury build. Nice. Other thoughts. The overall feedback from the team was that even at these early stages, Diablo 4 is very fun to play. The classes especially are going down a promising path that we're excited about. We're taking cues from what makes the Barbarian's arsenal system or the Druid shapeshifting feel special, and looking for ways to apply similar innovations to all classes. More on this in a future update. The playtest was also a really good way to put our tech through its paces since we played at home. We got to test the game on a lot of different setups, from graphic cards to screen aspect ratios to network speeds. We also had the opportunity to exercise our client-server technology, including deploying builds with fixes to bugs during the playtest. Of course, we still have a lot of work ahead of us, and to be clear, we are not in an alpha. We are not an alpha or beta stage yet, so this is pre-alpha now. We don't typically discuss our early milestones publicly during the course of development, but we think it's especially important to continue to share our progress during a year without a BlizzCon. Also, this was an important milestone for the team as we feel it corroborated that we have all the key ingredients for a great Diablo 4. Of course, we'll continue to seek feedback and iterate as we drive to completion. We hope that you've enjoyed this update, and as always, we welcome you to share your thoughts on the platform of your choice, whether it's your own forums, other sites, or social media. We read and appreciate your comment and feedback. We were happy to see lots of great discussion after our last blog, which seeded a bunch of conversations on our end as well. We are also excited to see the range of topics you want to hear about based on your response so far. We think talent trees are by far what you're most eager to discuss. I think they're on board with that, because that was my biggest concern, was this kind of small twig that you could choose from. Obviously, I never played Path of Exile. I know it was a big concern for many players going into Path of Exile, how ridiculously large the talent tree is there. Obviously, Blizzard don't have to do anything near that scale, because Blizzard games aren't necessarily around that kind of like... They're sort of more accessible for the most part, for most players. They have a wider audience, so that's why they try to reach more accessibility. But you got to always implement enough detail for those hardcore players to keep the game interesting, because people like watching the hardcore players, and that brings an audience. And, you know, you got to cater for a bit of everything, really, without hurting the sort of more casual players, let's say. But more options is always good. Think of it that way. As long as it's not too difficult to balance. I don't know how they balance those Path of Exile talent trees. Maybe they just don't, and they just let you just do whatever you do, and it is what it is. You can't balance it at the end of the day. So where was I before I went off my little rant there? I've forgot where I was. I think milestones, I read through that. We'll continue the completion. We hope that you've enjoyed this update. Oh yeah, I read that. We are also excited to see the range of topics you want to hear about. Based on your response so far, we think talent trees are by far what you're most eager to discuss, so we'll make sure to queue that up for our very next blog. Items continue to be a popular topic, and there was also a lot of interest in music. We are shooting to having more updates around these topics later in the year. Let us know how that sounds. Thank you for taking the time to read this update. We can't wait to share more of Sanctuary with you. So development is well underway outside the dry steppes. More of Sanctuary awaits in coming updates. So Louis Barriga, game director, Diablo 4 team. And there's a nice little image of a very atmospheric, dark looking Diablo. So that's what they wanted to end on, and it looks pretty damn good. Nice. I like that. That was a good read. It was a lot of a read, but it was a good read. They were quite open and honest with what they were trying to display and work out with their playtest. So good to get all that information so we can sort of absorb it and make our own opinions, and hopefully some of those opinions will create some good feedback for the team to work on. So yeah, nice to see. There's a little Diablo 4, I say little, Diablo 4 quarterly update, not quite that little. And hopefully you enjoyed it. So thanks for watching.